Michael Hinton was born in Atlanta, but spent much of his early life in England. He works as a lobbyist at the Oklahoma Capitol Building. In April, he lived in the YMCA building on Northeast 5th Street, and his daily routine was to catch the city bus that stopped across the street in front of the Murrah Building at 8:50 a.m. On the morning of the blast, having just missed his usual bus by a minute, he made a fateful decision. Had he not made the right one, he undoubtedly would have been the 170th person to die in the explosions. Mr. Hinton has definite convictions about the question of a second blast.
I am active with Ross Perot's United We Stand America. I was a federal law enforcement officer for nearly 22 years. That included the military service. And I'm here actively in the Oklahoma City area where I'm continuing my duty and service to my country. April 19th, I just had came out the YMCA, run across the street on the Northwest 5th Street in Robinson area, about, I'd say 50 feet diagonal direction to the Federal Building. I'm standing there on the corner that morning waiting for a Metro Transit bus, and I discovered, it was at 10 minutes till 9 at the time I was standing there, and I discovered I'd missed two buses. So at 8:55 or about 8:56 that morning of April 19th, 95, I run down to Northwest 5th and Broadway. Another bus was coming through the intersection, and I caught him just in time. This bus was running late. But I got on and went on to the transfer terminal where I was to catch another bus bound for the state capitol. Well, after I gotten off of the bus to transfer onto the bus that's headed for the state capitol, it hadn't even been hardly 2 minutes before I heard this very violent rumble under the bus. And it occurred 2 times where the bus rocked on its side twice. And I'd say this occurred about 6 to 7 seconds apart. At that time, none of us knew what was going on, and I commented to the bus driver, I said, "Mike, what was that all about?" And we thought maybe another bus coming in had crashed into us or lost its brakes or something, so, we were all just sitting there in, a state of shock, like, we'd never felt nothing like that. But the bus, something to raise a bus, that much, equipment that heavy. And it was an interesting thing that the news reporters kept emphasizing on all of the local tele channels is that the Murrah Building just had received a bomb threat 1 week prior to the actual bomb explosion that morning of April the 19th.
You had witnessed this, had you not?
Yes, I had witnessed. Now, what is interesting is that on a Wednesday, it's been about April 12th, 1 week exact, before the bombing actually occurred. It was in the afternoon, I would say 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There was a gathering of, I'd say, it was 350 to 400 people standing around the Federal Building. I'm looking out my window at this, and I'm saying, like, well, what could be going on at the Federal Building? I said, well, maybe they had a fire drill, maybe there was some type of ceremony going on, but the more I looked and watched this, I watched these people about 30 minutes, and, it didn't appear anything that was formal, like I said, going on. People were standing there, engaged in conversations and what have you. So I started to go across the street and inquire, and I said, well, maybe it's just a fire alarm went off or something, so I paid no more attention to it. But on the morning of the bomb explosion, and they were emphasizing that the Murrah Building had received a threat, the thought came to me then, well, what I had observed out my window 1 week prior, that may have what was going on then.
Was there any doubt in your mind or anyone's mind that there were 2 incidents here, 5 or 6 seconds apart?
Well, I can't speak for the other passengers. I can only speak for me. What I personally heard and know for myself, that there were 2 distinct explosions that I heard, and the bus responded twice by rocking on its side like it did. In fact, in that second explosion, I thought, well, for a while there, the bus is going to turn over.
Mr. Hinton has a friend who works in the downtown library just a block behind the Murrah Building. It, too, received severe enough damage to close it for several weeks. The two later had a conversation about the matter, and Michael asked him,
I says, where were you on the morning of the bomb explosion? He says, Michael, I was right here in the library. I says, how many explosions did you hear? He said, I heard what appeared to be 2 distinct explosions and possibly a third.
Despite the best efforts of the authorities, the 2 blast theory rolls on. More witnesses come forward. Jim Ferguson is a heating and air conditioning engineer and a foreman in charge of many of the downtown federal buildings in Oklahoma City, and of course at one time the Murrah Building. His office is downstairs in the United States Courthouse, and he was on the scene doing rescue in less than 1 minute after the explosion. And his version of what happened destroys almost every major point of the government story. When I asked Jim if he had heard 2 explosions, he answered as if I had naively asked him if he still believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Why, heck yeah, I heard 2 explosions, he told me. Everybody in town heard 2 explosions. His wife, sitting at the table, then told us that she and her mother-in-law, Jim's mother, were at the farmer's market, about 1.5 miles southwest of the Murrah Building that morning. They heard the first explosion, turned to see what was going on, saw a cloud rising from the Murrah Building, and about 5 or 6 seconds later, she described it, saw a second mushroom cloud rise from the building following a second explosion. ABC Television's Good Morning America wanted to talk to the maintenance crew at the federal buildings. Jim Ferguson, of course, was part of that. And all went well until he began to tell about bullets zooming by his ear a half an hour or so after the explosion when he was doing a rescue on the 3rd floor. Cameras began to roll again as excited reporters jumped forward with their pads and pencils to hear this man's story. He said, I was in Vietnam. I know what bullets going by your ear sound like. And they said, what are you talking about? And he explained that the cache of ammunition from the 9th floor, where the building had ruptured, had dumped into the automobiles down on the ground, and the fires there were setting off ammunition, and bullets were zinging by Jim's head. It's made a great story, a human interest story, a blockbuster of a story. But when it got to New York, someone chose to cut the segment, and it was never aired. I asked Jim if he had trouble breathing once he was inside the Murrah Building. He said yes, he was there in less than a minute. In fact, the dust was still rising. I said, what about gas? What about fire? And he was very emphatic and said there was absolutely no gas, no flames in the Murrah Building. We spoke with the Fergusons at their home on the night of Wednesday, June 14th, 1995. The next afternoon, June 15th, I reported this story over the People's Radio Network nationwide. A few days later, Jim had a visit from 2 FBI agents. And it was for this reason that he subsequently refused to go on camera with us for this documentary or even be interviewed by anyone else. You could call him another witness, intimidated by those who were supposed to be attempting to solve the crime. Now, I'm not an explosive expert by any means, but however, to a man, you should know that every explosive expert, from former Navy SEALs to civilian owners of demolition companies that we talked to, have all told us that an ANFO bomb, that's ammonium nitrate fuel oil, ANFO, an ANFO bomb has 2 glaring signatures, nitrate gas and fire. Even after the flames are out, you can't go near that scene for an hour or 2 without a gas mask. If the FBI and the control news media were seriously looking for the real facts of the case, would they not attempt to draw conclusions from the evidence of witnesses such as Jim Ferguson? His testimony not only strengthens the likelihood of there having been multiple bombs on the scene, but all but eliminates the possibility of this damage having been caused by an ANFO explosion. The evidence shows that if there even was an ANFO bomb outside, it was only large enough to cause a diversionary effect, strong enough to destroy not much more than whatever vehicle carried it and maybe some windows, but thereby igniting the numerous car fires in immediate proximity and allowing its nitrate gas to dissipate quickly into the open air. According to every independent expert we spoke with, the truck bomb simply could not have been large enough to cause the massive damage seen at the Murrah Building.